So today I wanted to talk about taking care of yourself, because I read this book recently and it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think this is the book that talks about this. I've read a lot of books recently, but yeah, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the habits that he talks about in that book, the author, is coming from a place of first independence and then interdependence. So I don't know about you, but I've often found myself to be a people pleaser. I tend to try to make other people like me. And I'm like overly nice to people. Even when I have a different opinion than them, I might agree with them. I might just be overly agreeable in order for people to like me more. That's been like a huge problem for me my whole life. And only recently have I started making like some progress and just like actually speaking my own opinion and not focusing on the reaction of other people, but just focusing on what the right thing to say is. And so this concept of like independence, basically in this book, he says that there are basically 3 types of relationships. And when I think of relationship, that could be like, an intimate relationship with somebody, a friendship, or just like some kind of companion, or like somebody who you associate with. So the 3 types of relationships that you can have, even if a relationship is just like interacting with one person during the day, whatever, just a relationship is just 2 things reacting with each other, or 2 humans reacting with each other, interacting with each other. So the 3 types of relationships are like codependent relationships, independent, and interdependent. Codependent relationships are where people are like, they're codependent on each other. So basically you rely on the other person for your own happiness and well-being. Without that other person, you'd be nothing. This is what most relationships are, and in my opinion, this is pretty unhealthy because 1, that's not really good for your self-esteem if you're relying on outside sources for happiness, and 2, it's kind of manipulative because, imagine being in a relationship where the other person, it's just not working out, and the other person wants to leave, and then you become all needy and start crying and try to manipulate them into coming back. That's not good. It's going to set up an inauthentic relationship. So I've had problems with codependence. I tend to try to, agree with everybody, be overly nice to everybody, and make everybody like me in order for myself to feel good and safe. Really, it's to feel safe, because I think that I'm scared a lot of the time in life. I have a fear of like abandonment. I have a fear of being alone, left alone, and just not surviving being alone. I don't know, probably some traumatic thing happened to me when I was a child or something. But anyway, a lot of relationships are like that. And in this book, he talks about rising from codependence to independence. So you can't jump from codependence to interdependence. You have to go from codependence to being independent. And being independent is like the base that you should have as a person before you get into a relationship. So basically, if you're independent, you're self-reliant. You have self-esteem. You rely, like your self-worth, your sense of self-worth and your happiness comes from within. It comes from you telling yourself that you're good enough, and just basically loving yourself is really what it comes down to. Interdependence, like being in an interdependent relationship, is when you're both independent, you're both doing your own thing, you're both self-reliant, but you pump each other up, you help each other. So I really wanted to start talking in this video about learning to treat yourself better, because I've had a lot of times in my life where I'm not treating myself very well. I'm not, like, I'm being lazier than I want to, or I'm getting into like addictive behaviors that are destructive, that take energy away from me. not treating my body that well by not eating, enough good food, things like that, where I'm just not loving myself enough. I'm not respecting myself enough. I mean, that's really a huge part of being independent, right? Because if you're not treating yourself well, then you have a bigger chance of being codependent and relying on other people for happiness. Because if you're not happy, if you don't treat yourself that well, you're gonna try to look towards other people and try to even maybe manipulate other people into treating you well, so you can use other people to build up your self-esteem. But here's the thing: other people can't build up your self-esteem. Well, I think they can. I don't really know. I don't really know too much about self-esteem. But I know that when you rely too much on what other people think of you and how other people are treating you, that really builds up your ego. And your ego is basically this thing that covers up your self-esteem. Your self-esteem is basically what you are telling yourself on the inside about yourself. It comes from you loving yourself no matter what. And I think maybe that comes from good parenting right from the start of your life, I think. Or I think kids are actually born with self-esteem. It's just their self-esteem gets beaten down. And then they have this low self-esteem, and then they start requiring other people to to validate them, to determine their own self-worth. And that builds up their ego, like, oh, this person told me I'm cool. Okay, now I'm cool. But the ego is very fragile because the ego relies on other people for validation, for approval. That's not practical to live like that, because then you're not in control of how good you feel. You should be in control of that, and you are in control of that. You just have to treat yourself better, almost like a cat that grooms itself. Yeah. So I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about in this video. I know that I should treat myself a lot better. Sometimes I don't treat myself very well. Sometimes I get scared in life. Sometimes I feel like there's some kind of void, and I try to fill it with, junk food and bad habits, and mindless internet surfing, things like that. And other destructive, addictive behaviors. Some people use alcohol every night to drown that void out. But what people don't realize is those addictions actually create a void. They create a bigger void. You might have used those to make yourself feel better at one point, but then you started to rely on them. And now it's just like you're trying to cover up your self-esteem with this numbing effect through use of, addictive behaviors, and then even getting addicted to just that, like I said, that validation and approval from others. But self-esteem really just comes from within, and it comes from treating yourself well. So if you're watching this, God, what do I even want to say? What would I say to myself if I really loved myself? You can do it. I love you. And I believe in you. And you are worth something for the simple fact that you're a human being. And if you have any doubts about that, you've been wounded, and I'm sorry, but learn to treat yourself better, and you'll start feeling better.